Please welcome partner, Bessemer Venture Partners, Talia Goldberg, and Chief Operating Officer, Google Cloud, Francis deSouza.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to our session today. Promises to be a good discussion, and maybe we'll just start with introductions. I'll put you on the spot. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
All right. Thank you all for having me here. SaaStr has grown tremendously, and we've been super proud to be a part of it for many years. I'm a partner at Bessemer Venture Partners. We are a global venture firm investing in audacious founders building the next generation of legendary businesses from the earliest stages, when you're just an idea on a napkin, all the way up to a late stage, growth stage, pre-IPO companies. And so I've been fortunate to work with a lot of our AI native companies like Perplexity and Supermaven Cursor and Anthropic and the like.
Great. Thank you for doing this. And I am Francis deSouza. I'm the Chief Operating Officer at Google Cloud. As many of you may know, we have a big focus at Google Cloud on the startup community. And one of the reasons startups choose to work with us, in addition to the strengths of our enterprise-ready cloud offerings, are that we've invested in the AI stack, all the way from chips to models and applications. And we make that expertise available to startups. And so we have a very robust startup program. If you want to learn more about it, talk to me afterwards. Talia, let's start with, this is an incredible time to be an entrepreneur. Let's talk a little bit about the big trends you're seeing in AI and what's driving this moment.
Gosh, this is just an unbelievable moment in AI. And every day that, if I reflect on the last 2-3 years, all the progress that we thought might happen 5 years from now, 10 years from now, feels like it's happening in even just 1 year. And so the pace at which the field is advancing is just so mind-blowing. And by the way, from an investing standpoint, that means that probably the number one thing that we look for, or at least I look for in teams, is speed of execution. It is so hard to, at the earliest stages, you really don't have moats. You have teams, you're building, you're doing what you can, and how fast you can move and adapt to this rapidly changing market, that is so critical. But from a trend perspective and what we're seeing, we've really seen this shift from language models that were generating to now taking action and this agent ecosystem. And where markets used to tap into just software budget, we're now seeing that change into labor budget and code becoming labor itself. And that's a really interesting trend that we're spending time in. I imagine you're seeing things somewhat similar. But Francis, I know you have been at Google only 4 months, so somewhat new, but it's such an incredible landscape to see what's happening in the AI ecosystem. I can't think of anyone better, from the startup world to the model layer to the application layer, enterprises. What's been most surprising to you, and what are your biggest observations a few months in?
Yeah, I think one of the things that has really surprised me is how fast AI is being adopted by even the largest companies in the world. I think in my 3 decades plus in tech, this is the fastest I've seen of an adoption of any technology ever. A year ago, we would have been talking about pilots that were being done at customers. Everybody was doing a pilot, but it wasn't clear anybody was ready to roll Gen AI out into production. A year later, we now have some of the largest companies in the world, the Verizons of the world, the Seattle Children's Hospitals, Toyotas of the world, that have already rolled out Gen AI applications on the factory floor, in the hospital, in the call centers. So not only is it fast, but the other thing that's surprising is we're seeing large companies lead the revolution as much as digital natives. Again, typically, technology finds its footing first in smaller companies that move more quickly, but this wave is being adopted by large companies too. And I think it speaks to the really significant benefits that companies are able to see really quickly from adopting Gen AI. So that's been probably the single biggest surprise. The second surprise may be around the fact that because the technology is evolving so quickly, it's becoming really clear that a winning strategy as a vendor and as an enterprise is to make sure that you stay open. We don't believe the end is there's going to be one model to rule them all. That's why in our Vertex AI platform, we support over 30 models across different vendors, right? And so there are actually it's between the vendors and the models itself, it's over 200 models that we support in Vertex AI. And so our belief is that you're going to see models that show up that are specific for use cases. And so we want to support them all. And again, we think it's going to be an open world going forward.
We really appreciate the openness. That having an open ecosystem is critical for the startup ecosystem to thrive, but we also think leads to a lot of mutual benefits. One of the things that has been so great about Google is that you do support so many models, right? You support Anthropic and you support all the Gemini models and lots of open source models, and the ecosystem is so broad. At the same time, a couple of my most recent investments, I've gotten the question from my partnership saying, why won't Google do this? And that's like an age-old question that you get. And maybe I'll be proven wrong and all these investments were crazy. But there are companies like Perplexity in the search space, or DeepL that's building the AI real-time translation. And one might say, wow, like Google is better positioned. You have more capital, you have the distribution, you have the technology, you have the AI. But yet we've seen a lot of startups continue to succeed. But I'm curious we have a lot of founders in the room here. And if you were to put on your founder hat and think about what you do at Google, are there areas though where you might say, hey, Google's a really open ecosystem. I wouldn't go there. And this place, Google is going to do this and we are going to crush this. And in this area, I actually see a lot of opportunity. What advice might you give?
Sure, Talia. And I'll give you a heads up that I'm going to end my answer by asking you, as a venture capitalist, when you look at startups, how do you think about this is a company that's in the way of where the models are going to go versus you guys having a clear idea of, no, we think this is a space. And I'd love to, at the end of it, I'm going to ask you how you guys think about whether the startup is likely to thrive or is in the path of a big model. So how do we think about this space? At Google, we are focused on a few parts of this AI stack. We have invested now for over a decade at the sort of infrastructure layer, so building chips. In fact, a few weeks ago, we just announced Ironwood, which is the 7th generation of our TPUs, which is coming out at the end of this year in our Google Cloud. It's 40 plus exaflops per pod, 9,000 chips per pod. We've invested in the network layer. So we're building on what is already a planet-sized infrastructure with over 2 million miles of fiber that are deployed under the sea, terrestrially, and in the air. We're also investing, obviously, in models. And so we just released a refresh of our 2.5 model, which is at the top of the leaderboards for things like coding and so on. But we also have our image models, our voice models, our video models, our open source models. And as you said, we're partnered with Anthropic, with DeepSeek, with a whole set of other players to make sure that a whole community of models is available to our developers. And then we've picked certain areas where we invest in applications. So we have a call center application, for example. We have an agent building application, Agent Space. We have security agents that are available out of the box. And then for everything else, we rely on you, all of you, the ecosystem, to say, look, the reality is we believe a huge part of the enterprise IT market is going to be transformed over the next few years by companies like you. And that is a lot of ground to cover. And so we're really focused on creating good startup programs, deep ecosystems, technical collaborations with our experts to enable all of you to go into vertical markets. There are exciting things done in those spaces, companies like Harvey or Glean, or to provide tools, to provide a set of applications that'll be the next generation of some of today's SaaS applications. Those are all areas we are not going into. So let me turn it over to you. How do you think about deciding whether to invest in something or not?
If I heard that correctly, a lot of the application layer feels very much open too.
Very much.
That aligns well with a lot of where we're spending our time. Look, I think when you're looking at companies like a Google or a Microsoft or an Amazon, pick these large, super large platform businesses, it's really hard to compete with someone that's doing everything. And so as a startup, your best advantage is focus and doing something really well. And you have to do something really well to even get the opportunity to do the next thing, and then the next thing and the next thing. And so that focus is something that we look for. That can be a focus in a horizontal category or in a vertical. Verticals in particular, if the why won't Google do this, it's pretty easy to answer because your TAM is in the trillions. And most of the verticals, even in the multi-billion dollar or tens of billions of dollar TAM, it's not at the scale yet that a Google is spending time, or there's some amount of innovator's dilemma there. And so those areas are often ripe for startups. But I'll also note that a lot of the best, most interesting companies, they create their own categories. And so it's not even something that we're saying like, why won't Google do this? You're like, why would anyone do this? And it's funny, but if I think back to Bessemer's first investment at the Series A of Shopify, it was actually a very contrarian investment at the time. No one wanted to invest in this group from Canada that had high churn, and people would say, who's actually going to sell things online? It seemed crazy. And these markets that now it seems so obvious, those are also ones that we get really excited about, and teams that see that future and are creating a category and enabling something.
Let me, for the benefit of the audience, you guys see a lot and you have a lot of inbounds. Thousands of companies probably reach out to you guys. How would you advise this team in terms of reaching out to you? There's been a lot of debate about, is a cold email to VCs effective? What is the best way to break through the noise and at least show Bessemer and you what people are working on?
Most of the companies that I've invested in, I've found them. And there's a lot of different ways to do VC, and some people maybe have it a lot easier than me, and they just sit back and great deals come to them and they just sit there and the next great bajillion-dollar company falls in their lap. And like, we try and build the relationships and we have a reputation and we want that inbound. But oftentimes the companies that I get really excited about, I have some thesis or I've seen something that they're doing and I'm like banging down their doors to try and meet with me. And build something that people really want. That's great. Show that you're moving fast and executing, and the VCs will find you. That's number one. But separate from that, maybe just a little bit more tactically, I do think the very best connections come from endorsements from oftentimes other founders or customers that find their way in. And I think it's your job as a founder to be able to hustle and to find that way in. And if you can't hustle to find your way in, it's going to be hard for you to hustle to find your way into customers too. And make it happen.
Make it happen. I love that. And from our perspective, we have the Google for Startups program. For those of you in the room here, we do have a booth. So if you want to find a way to get to us, we have a fully staffed booth after this. You can go. And again, we are really keen to cultivate the entire ecosystem. We do believe this is going to be a massive opportunity for startups to redefine the enterprise IT infrastructure, and we want to be a part of that. And it's a combination of, again, the network, the credits, the infrastructure, but also access to expertise. So if you're wondering, how do you break through? We have a booth right there. Make sure to come and find us afterwards. Maybe I'll turn it over a little bit to say, talk a little bit about some of the categories you're excited about and maybe some of the startups that you're invested in that you are super excited about.
Yeah. So a few categories or areas. One, we talked a little bit about this notion of code eating into the labor budget, and actually thinking about one, just how big. It sometimes breaks the brain to think how big this technology market might be when you take a moment to think that it's not just 1 or 2% of a company's spend on software, but suddenly you can really expand the pie and tap into some of the labor spend and create a lot more productivity. So we're looking at that in particular around different verticals where that specialization can create much better performance and where you can tap into maybe some existing data or distribution partnerships. So one great example in the healthcare space, it's actually really interesting, this shift to the labor budget has been interesting to see in healthcare specifically, because historically healthcare was a laggard for the SaaS adoption. In our portfolio, we have a whole team investing a lot in healthcare, and they were always behind in SaaS. And in AI, it's been totally different. We have a company, Abridge, that's one of the fastest growing companies, selling tens of millions of dollars of just contract value even to large hospital systems, doing scribing, but also automating and improving a lot of the back office experience. And by the way, that's so critical for this country and for America to be doing work like that, and so desperately needed as costs are ballooning. And so we're really excited about that space. Maybe the second area I'll just briefly mention is conversational data. A lot of data happens like this, like us having the conversation. You need that context for agents for AI to be able to work. It's not just what's sitting in your email inbox or in the CRM, it's what's happening all around. And so there's actually a company called Recall AI that's like enabling this as a developer platform to make it easy for people to integrate that data or capture and ingest that from video calls and audio calls and meetings. And I think a lot of interesting companies are going to be built by capturing this type of data that previously we couldn't even make sense of without AI.
Yeah.
What about you?
Let me build on that. So first of all, I want to touch on what you said. It is interesting to see that healthcare is among the early adopters for AI. We're seeing that too. And again, like you, historically, healthcare has been very slow to jump on new technologies. We have lots and lots of cases now of hospitals, drug discovery companies, life science tool companies that are really embracing AI and applications around AI. We are also interested in the whole area of cybersecurity. And we think it's one, as you digitize more of our lives with digital twins and so on. Two, as we move to the cloud, you're creating a greater attack surface area. But then with AI, you are turbocharging both the offense and the defense capabilities. And so we're always looking for exciting new ideas in the world of cybersecurity and AI. The other interesting thing that I think we will see that might be different from previous waves is it is now possible to imagine companies that are less than 10 people that could be $100 billion company, potentially even bigger. There's just so much leverage for startups in just leveraging AI themselves. And we're starting to see some examples of that where there's an insane amount of value being delivered from an incredibly small team. You must be seeing
Crazy. Yeah. Cursor publicly is now at about 300 million of revenue or ARR. And I think their team is like 60 people. It is just astounding and it breaks the brain. And by the way, that doesn't mean like the bar is higher for what you need to achieve. But the good news is that it also means that you can achieve a lot more with limited resources. At Google, are there anything maybe for you personally or maybe for the organization that you've done or that you use regularly that's been impactful in your life or in your team's life?
From an AI perspective, I use AI many times a day. All the usual tools for when I need to do deep research on anything. There are a whole set of tools where you can ask it to drill down on a company, a category. We have great tools in Google where we've set it up so that you can basically navigate not just the internet, but your own data sources, structured and unstructured, and use your agents to answer questions in real time, in meetings, with a huge level of specificity. But I not only use it at work. I was, as an example recently, where I was talking to my daughter. She's in college, and she was talking about she's a double major, trying to fit all her classes in. And so she used an AI tool to plan out her schedule classes for the next 3 years, looking for conflicts and what the prereqs were. And so across the board, it's incredible what you can do. And what are the things that you use?
I'll share one interesting personal use case that just pulling on the health thread, which is that it took me a while, but I pulled all my data from all the electronic medical records that I've had access to or had data stored in for the past decade or so. And I pulled it out and I had organized it. It took a bunch of time. And then I put it in a AI system. And I basically now, anytime I have a question on my own health and as a hypochondriac, I have a lot of questions on my own health, but it gives me an answer that is so unbelievable in detail and in personalization that is interesting. I come from a family of doctors. Actually, my parents are doctors. My sister's a doctor. It would be impossible for them to ingest all of this data and to have read through every blood lab that I've done for the past 15 years and to spot those trends. It is just impossible. And so having that level of personalization and context has been so impactful in my life. And by the way, I hope someone builds this as a product because this should be a company.
You heard it first. And that is a great note for us to end on. Thank you all for your time. A reminder, we have the booth out there if you have any questions, but thank you. And thank you, Talia.
Thank you all.